There we go. Got it. All right, we'll call the committee of the whole meeting to order. And if we want to go over consent agenda items, I know we had the Walker Avenue Bridge removal contract pulled from the agenda because we had some items that were not quite ready for showtime yet. So I don't know if you want to touch on that or if we just want to jump into the Speedway right-of-way stuff.
Yeah, that'll be, excuse me, at a future meeting.
Yep.
Working out some final details with MDOT that weren't quite ripe for approval tonight, so.
Perfect.
Is that with the MDOT contract or funding?
No, it was more for the awarding of the bid. There was just a question on some of the, one of the items in the bid, so. Want to make sure everything, all the i's are dotted and t's are crossed before we present it to you. So they get a little finicky if you approve it before it's, before they approve it all.
Oh, yeah. Our friends at MDOT.
Yep.
All right. So that one being off the table today, the Speedway right-of-way.
Yep,
Gonna ask Frank to walk through that. He has a couple slides that I think will help explain what they got going on out there, which has been an ongoing project for many, many years. But Frank can walk you through. He's been dealing with their legal counsel between theirs and ours. So.
Okay, good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
We provided you with the license agreement and then the exhibits that go along with it. And this issue traces back, I believe, to the early 2000s. You may recall, I'm just going to double check that we've got the right image up there. Okay, let's start with where we're at in the city, all right? Because I always like to start with spatial orientation. This one's pretty easy to explain. City Hall is at the lower right and the roundabout's right in the middle. If you look off to the northwest towards the upper left of the screen, you see a parcel outlined in blue. That used to be a Citgo gas station. If you recall, it was a small gas station. It was kind of wedged onto that site. And it was there for decades, as I understand. So when they closed that gas station, they were required to take the underground storage tanks out of the ground, and they then had to monitor groundwater for contamination. So the area that's shown in red is where this agreement now says we're asking, Speedway Corporation is asking for the ability to continue to have monitoring wells in the right-of-way, 3 spots within that red oval along Wilson Avenue, between the roundabout and the IGB restaurant car. So, or IBG. Mix the letters up. The agreement has been gone through a few times, and there was one final amendment that they sent out late last week, so I gave you a red line copy and a clean copy. The red lines they made were not what I would consider substantial. So they were minor edits that came in at the last minute. The overall document asks for a license to be able to continue those wells, the operation and monitoring of those wells. If any construction is needed for some reason within the right-of-way, the agreement clearly states that a public works permit is required, and then there are standards for the public works requirement. And it will be good, I believe, through 2029, December 31. It is the end of 2029, I believe it runs out. December 31st, 2029, this agreement will be in effect. So the agreement's fairly short. We've worked that over. More than happy to go through that with you folks. And then the exhibits, Exhibit A dates back to the original agreement. And I did a little bit of working there just to make this easier to read, believe it or not. So Exhibit A is called a work plan, which is usually what you do when you're dealing with remediation. So I kind of tuned that up. And then Exhibit B, we asked them to clarify where the wells are. And the font size is so small on this that it's very difficult to read. And that's why I'm summarizing it with the map. You have the plan, but you really need to zoom in to be able to see where the wells are. Some of the original wells have been taken out, and then these are the 3 that they would like to continue through 2020. And Eagle, former DEQ, is what we call the authority or the agency having jurisdiction on this.
So they're the ones that are in charge of where the well, new wells and where they're gonna be placed.
Correct. And I believe the wells are there. They may have been moved during the roundabout construction, but the agreement ran out.
So, 10 years, and it's, shows no contamination. Who, or if we decided we're on road project, who's gotta pay to move them, or, if the agreement expires, who removes them? At whose expense, or,
Well, that's contained in here.
okay,
The city, the reason they want a license agreement is so they can keep those wells there. And when they redid the road, my understanding is that those wells were relocated, so they should not need to be moved unless the plume moves. Because there was a well across the street, if you look closely at the plans, and that one has been closed.
okay.
So it sounds like they're changing, monitoring wells based on potential contamination levels in the ground. But the document clearly states that, number one, they'd be able to keep those wells there through the end of 2029. Any work they would do would require a DPW permit, the city's not going to pay for any of those fixtures, features that they might have. There's an indemnification clause in here, like you see in most contracts. So the city's indemnified and taken off and kind of a commitment list to doing the things that you might be concerned about. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to see that you've been working with the legal people to get this done, and there's an end, and you have terms and everything set up in that, because when these first started, oh, it's a temporary well. Well, what's temporary? There's no, somebody thought it was 40, somebody else thought it was 20. So I think, it's something that if they want them or not, I believe, they still got to stay there and it's still got to be done. And so I think you're doing a good job of protecting the city and it's got to be done, so as long as we're covered. The reason I ask questions, I'm thinking, I know where the old gas station's set and everything, but there's no wells over there. But, I know they go around and they do a lot of drilling and checking the earth, the ground for contamination. So if that's where it's at, well, then it's got to be monitored. And so I think it's, are they going to put in a new gas station there, or are they just the wells?
I haven't heard anything about that. The property is really narrow,
Right.
so I don't know what you could retrofit to a modern gas station standard there.
Right.
I don't know, I haven't heard in the last 10 years anyone even come in and speculate on that property, so I'm not sure what's going on there.
All right. No, I'm just curious that,
Frank, I see that in the work plan, it says they'll be providing quarterly analytical results. Have we been getting those, and how do you make sure that you're getting them?
Well, the good thing is we have Jacob Gardner hired in DPW now, so this will fall under his purview. So if this contract, this license gets approved by you folks, I'm going to sit down with Jason, and if you notice on the bottom of page 1, in paragraph 2, locations, the last sentence we added in there, all GPS and GIS data necessary. My goal is to work with Jacob and start to get information about these things that are in the right of way in GPS and GIS. Then he can follow, and then he can say, we need the reports. Right now, I'll be honest with you, I don't know if we have those. But this is a way to work with a new employee with some technical skills to start building the database to say, do we have a quarterly report? Do we have the current license, or excuse me, the current insurance? The details that are in this agreement. So that's how we're going to implement and follow through and take use of Jacob's skills.
So we're approving this today, but we don't really know if the reports that came back are acceptable levels then, right?
We do not. And even if we had the reports, I wouldn't represent whether there are levels of contamination or not, because that's really not within the city's purview.
That's a DEQ thing?
It's a DEQ.
Okay.
So, because we don't have our own public health codes and those kind of things, and I've talked to some of you about this, we partner with all of the agencies that actually do have jurisdiction. And in this case, it's CGLE. There's an old law that was called Leaking Underground Storage Tank. Those of you who've been around a while on here, that's the LUST law. That's where all these old gas stations were closed, leaking tanks were taken out, and then the DNR probably at that point set up these protocols for monitoring sites after the tanks were taken out. And these are just the wells in the right-of-way. I believe there's still like a pump kit on the site itself. And it's right here. So, what I've seen with similar types of operations is they're required to pump that groundwater and sample. So that one is on their site, and then it looks like, I don't want to be, conjecture is not a wise thing to do, right? But the sampling wells are all to the northeast of the site, so that must be how they determine where the plume was. The good thing from a city perspective is that if you go in that direction, everybody is on municipal water,
Okay.
which a lot of communities don't have, but in this case, that's a good thing for residents in the city.
Okay. Great, thank you.
But as far as the county and the state and everybody, they're gonna do that. I mean, our purpose, I see this as placement of the wells, removal of the wells in the future if needed or anything. They're gonna be in our right of way. We've had to have some jurisdiction and an agreement with these folks, and I think we're doing our part as well, and we hope that the other agencies are doing theirs, so that's.
Any other questions on that? Okay. Moving on. Suppose we got some time. Do we want to talk about the resolutions a little bit?
Sure, unless there's any questions on the expenditures. I don't know if
Right,
didn't
expenditures.
see any, but we had about 4 weeks worth of bills, so there are quite a few of them in there this month because we didn't meet at the end of January, so.
Anything on the bills?
I just had one question.
Yep.
I mean, it was $144, but we rented stanchions for the Christmas party.
I'm guessing probably for the,
How much do they cost? I mean, why do we have to rent them for all of our events?
oh, I'm thinking they were for the Winter Fest,
Okay, yeah,
but I can double check on,
I just,
Yeah.
is it worth it to own them versus renting them?
yeah, I could double check them, let you know.
Okay. So we'll follow up on Commissioner Gruder's question.
Sure.
I guess moving on to the next item, we have the resolutions and the board and committee appointments. Everyone have a chance to look that over. Do we have any questions on that at this point?
Yeah, I have some questions.
Yep.
And I tried to talk to the mayor about this earlier today. He let me know I wasn't going to be here, so just to know that that conversation was had. So a couple of concerns that I have. I believe that we agreed as a body a while back to share application materials with the commission, just so that we would have some idea of who the people are who are applying for these positions and things like that. And I just want it noted that that did not take place here. So in essence, we're being asked to approve, committee appointments that we don't really know a lot about. So I'm a little bit concerned about that. And then another question I had was with the Emergency Planning Committee. I noticed that our IT manager is not a part of that committee, and I would like to strongly recommend that he is. I don't know that that's something we can do here. I understand that the mayor makes the committee appointments, and we approve them. So I think we should have our IT manager on our Emergency Planning Committee.
And is emergency planning, we redo those every year?
Yes.
Correct. Well, I think that certainly is a topic worthy of discussion. I don't know typically how many folks we have on emergency planning, because it seems like all of these members are pretty pertinent to the operation. But that's something certainly that would be worth discussing moving forward. I think the IT manager that himself, our newer employee, is pretty new. So to that end, I think if it were someone today, it would probably be Julie Block, right? Because she kind of has held that role, and I think we're still kind of integrating the new IT manager into all the systems at this point. But yeah, your point is taken, and there is value to the importance of those systems in emergency management.
Yeah, just a comment on that if I could. Yeah, I mean, that position is new, as we all know, that Jason just started with us. But if you look at our emergency management plan and the documentation in there of how it's followed, that this group follows and reviews on an annual basis, the IT people are obviously intimately involved in all that stuff. But does it make sense to have them on the committee itself? I guess that's a decision. I'm not opposed to it, but we didn't have that position a year ago when we had the last appointments. So, something to consider as we move forward.
Well, I think, too, a lot of these committees and appointments, standing committees, people have been in these positions, that sometime at another there was, when they were appointed or different things. And I think, you get committees and there's people that will change and move on or however, but I really think that I don't want to interview all these people every year. I don't think that would be the necessary to do that. But I think that, I'm building board of appeals and stuff in different committees that I see a lot of good people on here and understand why they're there. And so.
Yeah, but Dan, you've been here forever.
Well.
No, I hear what you're saying.
I see
I was just thinking, I also was wondering, I thought that you had provided us with the applications of people that we were appointing to committees.
We did. After January, after the mayor does his approvals, then if somebody else is appointed during the year, then we always bring them forward to the city commission. But the first of every year, it's the mayor's appointments. Basically that, and I do know from speaking with him that he personally called everybody on every committee. Most of these probably have been on committees for quite some time.
Right.
But if there's a new person on a committee, he obviously put them on. I know that also on community engagement committee that the chairperson and him personally interviewed the people. Mm-hmm. Maybe Elena was involved in that as well. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that was part of that whole discussion that we were going to have.
But the three of
chair.
them vetted them out and did interview them. I know there was a couple other positions or committees where people stepped off and said they didn't want to run again or be back on, and then he did appoint somebody to that position. That's all I know.
Okay, my brain isn't as young as it used to be, and I was recalling that we had all agreed that we would get the information at least. So, if a citizen were to ask us or something, for the new people, not for obviously for the reappointment, just new people, at least I would have had their application at some point, so I could say.
Did we receive the community engagement applications though, before we did the interviews? Because I know that we had been talking about putting them on community engagement since October, mid-October last year or so. Which I don't know if we got them sooner in the year at some point, because that could be, because the thing is, the way that community engagement worked with trying to get our stuff done for Winterfest and trying to finish that out while also trying to do these interviews, that's why the interviews got done later in December. So I think that we actually received those applications back in October when we had first talked about it, going through that we needed more people for the community engagement position.
So then we were provided with those before.
Yeah. I think that was back in October, because I know that's when we talked about it.
Hence my age problem.
Because isn't that when we had that on community engagement? We were trying to was October, I think. Yeah.
I saw Greg.
It was a while back. It was Jenna and Andrew.
Yeah.
Mary was more recent, and that one came just from the mayor.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, I'm not suggesting that we all interview all of these committee appointments. My concern was just that we had had this conversation about at least having the information for the new applicants and then just having that information so we can have some context. You know, it's like when you look at a contract, you want to read that contract before you sign it or say yes or no. And in this case, we're being asked to basically do that, like agree that these are worthy appointments, but we don't really have any information for them. So that's my concern in this. And it's not just the Community Engagement Committee. There are new people on the Income Tax Board of Review. There's a new person on Local Officers Compensation Commission. So there's quite a few people that are new that we haven't seen. And I'm not trying to second guess the mayor's choices. I'm just saying that as a commissioner, for me to be able to go back to my constituents and say, yes, I think these people are worthy of the committee, or even to be able to talk to my constituents about the fact that there were vacancies on some of these. You know, that's an opportunity that we have not had. So that's my question and my concern.
Well, I would definitely say that it's a pretty small number of appointments that were new that I was able to know. So I think that as far as I think there's value to the information and it's worth talking about again and trying to get more. But at the same time, I do see that a lot of times with a lot of these committee appointments in the past, we've struggled to get candidates. So it's not necessarily like the typical process where we're vetting a field and it's not like hiring an employee where we're reviewing a field of candidates. It's more like, in many cases, we're having to go out and find people who we feel are qualified for the positions, and that makes it a little harder for us to gather the information on them in the same way that you might otherwise have the information come in.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. We did not have that opportunity because we
Right.
didn't know there were vacancies on these committees.
Right.
So only one person went out and looked for potential. I mean, we weren't even asked if there was anybody in our wards or anything that had spoken about an interest in
Right.
the committee.
Right.
So I'm just concerned that, you know, the citizens voted in term limits because they were looking for some newness and freshness, and here's an opportunity to get some, you know, potentially new people involved, and we missed that opportunity because the process was
Well, I gotta say that,
as it is.
I gotta give the mayor a lot of credit. Call all these people, talk to these people, there's people on these boards. There's a lot of discussion, there can be alternates or people at the meetings and different things. And I'm not gonna say, yep, that was a bad decision, or this was good, or that was bad. But I think there's a lot of time and commitment put in this. And, I mean, it's been a process for years, so.
Yeah, and the one point that I said we, in that the city of Walker as a body, but at the end of the day, these are the mayoral appointments, and for our part, I guess, on the accountability side, if we're not satisfied with the amount of information that we get as a body, then that's kind of our prerogative to handle that in the handling of the appointments as the resolution. So I guess that's the direction I would give there, but does anyone else have any questions on that? We have about 5 minutes left, so I want to see if we can.
I'd also like to say that it would be nice if we had an opportunity to kind of know these people, or to put a name with a face, so that we knew, okay, that's so-and-so. So we kind of know that they're engaged in the city and that they're on a committee, so that we have a face to a committee for Carol and myself. And I believe that Mary Weaver is from the Second Ward. But regardless, I get what, it'd be nice just to have a little bit more information on the person that's on the committee, as well as being able to put a face with a name to even reach out and be more welcoming to them, or et cetera. So I understand everybody's opinion.
Well, and we'll, I guess, make sure to continue that conversation as we move forward, and I suppose we'll have to take action on this today, but beyond that, I think it is something that we can continue to kind of have that dialogue on, because I do know that we have had some discussion about how we're handling the committee and board appointments, so that can be something we'll address moving forward as well. 4 minutes, do we have time to touch on the special assessment district?
We absolutely do. This is our annual assessment district that we have in the Standale and the DDA district for the streetscape improvements. This is an annual, it's a 15-year running special assessment that we have, and this is to take care of the snow plowing of the sidewalks and care of the street lights and flowers and those types of amenities along the frontage of the district. And we're recommending, or the DDA has recommended, that we keep it the same as we have for the last several years on the assessments, and people are assessed on their front footage of their lots. So this comes to you with a favorable recommendation from the DDA to approve this, so we can get the bills out probably by the end of the week to these folks. And if they don't pay them, they end up on their tax bills.
Any questions on the special assessment district from the board here? Okay. Do we want to try and tackle in Winchester Woods phase 3, or do we want to wait until we get into the meeting? 3. Okay. Yep, that is perfectly fine. I know I'm intimately familiar with the project, but others still have some probably leniency on the time they'll take to prepare. So 3 minutes, everyone can take a minute, go freshen up the coffee, restroom, whatever may need be. All right, if we can call our assistant city manager back.
All right, thank you, sorry.
Absolutely, no problem. All right, and we will call the regular city commission meeting to order. I will be giving the invocation today, so shall we pray? Heavenly Father, we thank you for being here with us tonight as we gather to do good work on behalf of the people of the city of Walker. We ask that you offer us the guidance to do what is best for those who we are here to serve. And Lord, we ask you to protect those who work so hard to serve and protect us, from our emergency responders to our military. And Lord, we thank you for all that you do to allow us to be here and serve our community. In your name we pray, amen. Okay, everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And if the clerk would please call the roll.
Mayor Pro Tem Gilbert.
Present.
Commissioner DeShane.
Present?
Commissioner Kent.
Present.
Commissioner Heisinger.
Present.
Commissioner Gruders.
Present?
Commissioner Glenda.
Present.
And we have absence approval for Mayor Carey.
All right, and I will look for a motion to approve the absence of the mayor this evening.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Commissioner DeShane,
Support?
support from Commissioner Gruders. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, and I believe we have approval of minutes for 12/9/19 commission meeting and 12/16 work session meeting. Do we have to do those as separate motions? Okay, can I get a motion on the meeting minutes or any questions or concerns?
I'll make a motion.
All right, motion Commissioner Heisinger,
I'll support it.
support from Commissioner Kent. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, and we have now public comment on agenda items. So if there's anyone in the audience with comments on any of the items we'll be addressing today on the agenda, please feel free to come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Hi, we are Jeff and Carrie Tatro. We reside at 1362 Big Rocks Court, Walker, Michigan. Here to express my concerns with the Winchester Woods Lewis Farms development and the process around its design. Only a few houses in the affected area received the postcards notifying of the Planning Commission meeting last month discussing the development. The postcards that were received stated that they were to appear in person or provide written input. At the Planning Commission, the written input was never read into to be included for the Commissioner's consideration. It was included on page 72 of a 189-page packet, but only some of the communications were included. Kind of wondering what in that process broke down that that communication wasn't sent to the Commissioners. Our concern is all around the extension of a street called Tall Timber, which extends west off of Kinney, just north of Leonard. The proposed designs have shown this, changing it from a dead-end road, which it currently is, to through a residential neighborhood into a through street. They'll be extending to Wilson, Leonard, or both, depending on the designs that are being proposed. This will turn basically the street into a highway. There are currently 20 to 40 small children in that neighborhood, and more coming with the additional development of Phase 3 of Winchester Woods and later Winchester Woods Phase 4. The current traffic calming measures are ineffective as it is now as a dead-end street. They don't slow the traffic down. They definitely won't work at increased volumes. The bump outs have always served to basically damage the city plows. If you look at the curbs, they're heavily gouged and damaged already and causing more maintenance for your city vehicles, but do nothing to slow the traffic down. No other neighborhoods previously built in this corridor allow a street to connect from Kinney directly to Wilson. The Imperial Forest neighborhood to the south and the Richmond area to the north took concerted efforts to make sure the streets were broken up and did not allow a throughfare. The Tall Timber should be dead-ended in its Phase 4. A bike path or something similar could be used to connect it to the adjoining neighborhoods. The planning commission mentioned that the neighborhood would want it connected to use the commercial district that might be developed at Wilson and Leonard. I can assure you none of the neighbors are concerned about having to drive out to Kinney and drive around to Leonard to use those facilities if they choose to patronize them. They do not want this traffic through the neighborhood. It is dangerous. I'm trained in emergency medicine. I can tell you the difference between a kid getting hit by a car at 25 miles an hour and 45 is catastrophic.
What we could say is I'm sure that you've witnessed this too, even for the few months that Kinney was, the speed limit was adjusted from 35 to 45. And I can tell you, because we used to live in Arbor Estates on West Avery Court, people would fly through at 55 miles an hour. People go at least 10 miles above the speed limit, which means you could set the speed limit at 25 on Tall Timber if you make it a through street, but I guarantee you those people will be going 35 and 40 miles an hour. And what they're going to do is they're going to go to that commercial development on the corner. They're going to find out that they can't get out on the Leonard or Kinney, even if you try to adjust those traffic patterns. It's going to happen. There are going to be times, just like there are people who can't get out onto Lake Michigan Drive from McDonald's, and they go back through that neighborhood there. Guess what they're going to do? They're going to come back through Winchester Woods. And as my husband said, we have a number of small children, including the fact, and I know that my email was not included in the package because I sent one, and it addresses the fact that we are the parents of an adult child with autism. My son is 5 feet 10 1/4 inches and 180 pounds. He does not understand personal safety. My son likes to pick up trash in the neighborhood, and you're welcome, City of Walker, because he does a great job, but he will go towards that. And if you think at 5 feet 6, I can stop a 22-year-old at my age, it doesn't happen.
Our concern is what's driving this as well. The citizens of Winchester Woods, of the Shannon, the street to our north, are all against this. The developer doesn't want to do it. It's going to cost him money burning lots up on through streets. So there really is nobody driving this other than city staff. So we're asking for your help to make it clear to city staff that citizens don't want this. We don't need this. The connection to Shannon already gives a second egress exit for EMS or police personnel. So honestly, nobody is looking to do this other than city staff. And we need your help to try and get the citizens heard. We were just explained by Frank that it's going through no matter what we say. We have lots of residents who are going to take up lots of time at all your meetings until we're heard. So thank you.
Hello, I'm Vito Dolce. I live on 4057 Tall Timber, and I did not receive any postcards on any recent developments in quite some time. So I do fully support the Winchester Phase 3, 4, and Lewis Farms. However, I don't support connecting the two. There is very, very fast traffic I see every day just going to the second cul-de-sac, first cul-de-sac. People come in and out of there just looking at the development, and there's always speedy traffic. So connecting those two is just going to increase that, and definitely what you have in place now to stop the traffic is certainly not helping. And that's everything. Thank you.
Others? All right. Yep.
Can I bring my coffee?
Yeah.
Hi, Denny Van Portfleet, 4085 Tall Timber. Don't have a lot to say other than just opposed. I just want to clearly put that on record that I'm opposed of the connecting of Tall Timber to Wilson. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Boheis. I live at 1363 Big Rocks Court. Just wanted to let everybody know that I am opposed to connecting to Wilson as well. I have 4 small kids that are 6 and under right now, and the added volume of traffic would just be horrible to the neighborhood, not just for my family, but the future families that are coming into the neighborhood. So, thank you.
Good evening. My name is Erin Bastick. I'm on Winchester Court, 1327. Mother of 3, also a teacher. I currently have 4 moms on the phone right now, some of whom are home with kiddos with fevers and some who had other commitments, but all of them are saying the same thing. We're very concerned with the safety of our children. Not all of the homes or not all of the streets have sidewalks, and we have an abundance of young kids, all who are riding bikes. And I feel like the reason that we moved into Winchester Woods was for the safety, the location, and I feel like turning this into a through street that would, you all know how fast that traffic is going to go. There's no way to pretend that it wouldn't be that fast, but I feel like it puts our kiddos in danger. And if there were finished sidewalks, that's one thing, but the other thing that the moms in the neighborhood especially do really well is keep track of the cars that are going through there. And it's a very tight-knit community because we care about the safety of our kids. And when we know that the cars are in there because they're going to our house, or, you know, we get a ton just looking at the neighborhood in general, but now you have that connection to, you know, Wilson, and I just feel like in 2020, our world isn't as safe as it used to be, and we have that addition of all the people taking the shortcuts through and seeing the homes and seeing the kids, and I feel like it's a safety measure. If you look at the map of what a through street would save, it's literally half of a block to go around. I don't see the benefit in connecting all the way through. Obviously, the connection has to happen for this phase. You have to get in there, but to go all the way through, I'm not sure that there's much of a benefit. So from a safety standpoint, we definitely oppose this measure. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
My name is Kristen Van Ekerkhoff, and I reside at 4120 Tall Timber. And I also just want to go on record that we oppose having Tall Timber as a through street from Wilson all the way through. Thank you.
We have any others looking to address the commission?
Hi, I'm Janice Bastick, and I live on Shannon Street, and those are my grandchildren that live off of Tall Timber, and I strongly disagree about that going through as a through street because of the safety factor. We get people trying to come through Shannon Street, and they're flying down our street, and we're right on the end, and they go flipping around, and I just really don't think that's a good idea, and I just want to have it on record that I think for the safety of our children, it's not a good thing. Thank you.
All right. Any others? Okay. With that, I think we will close the public comment and move on to the consent agenda items. We had talked about that in the committee of the whole meeting, so unless there are any additional questions, I'll look for a motion to approve. All right, motion from Commissioner Kent. Support from Commissioner Heisinger. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Now jumping into the resolutions, we have resolution 20-548 for the board and committee appointments. If we have any further discussion on that, otherwise we'll look for a motion to approve.
Make a motion and support and then discuss.
We can, we're ready for whatever.
I'll make a motion that we accept the committee and board appointments.
All right, motion from Commissioner Kent. We have support.
I'll support.
Support from Commissioner Gruters. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
All right. Commissioner Glanville is the opposed. For the record, if we need that. Motion carries. And should be all set on that. So we'll move on to resolution 20-549 on the special assessment district. We had talked about that. Is there any further discussion? Okay. With that, I'll look for a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Motion from Commissioner Heisinger,
I'll support.
support from Commissioner Gruters. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, and for resolution 20-550, for the final preliminary plat for Winchester Woods Phase 3, I believe we are ready for the presentation. Mr. Wash.
Okay, bear with me, because I know this is, trust me, city staff is not trying
Yeah, that was under the consent
to be
agenda.
rational, unreasonable, or not listening. But I remember not too long ago that the folks on Kinney were very upset about phases 1 and 2, where you guys going in. And they were concerned about traffic, and they were concerned about drainage, and they were concerned about all the things that are raised. So just, I want you to understand from a staff standpoint, we deal with these projects in multiple phases, and our job is to make sure they work at the end. So I would point to, and some of you remember, before phase 1 came in, there was quite an uproar in the neighborhood about the Plat going in at all, because of all the things, essentially what you folks said. So we hear it all the way through. And there used to be a really nice forest where you guys live. That was, phase 1 and 2 was a very nicely forested woodlot, one of the few that we really had in this part of Walker. So, how do we make this work? If you bear with me for a second, I think we may have some resolution, because everything outside of phase 3 is a blank sheet of paper, essentially. So I don't like to get locked into things prematurely. I want to look at fundamentals, and I think we can do some things here and still look at phase 3. So if you give me a few minutes, I think this is important enough to take a look at some slides. Is that okay? Fair?
Yes.
All right. All right. Perspective from the region. The red box is Lewis Farms, okay? You can see in this area, here's phase 1 of Winchester Woods, and here's phase 2 going in. These are a little bit dated. Phase 3 is proposed to the north to connect to Shannon. Shannon was not cul-de-sac, that was dead-ended years ago before I started with the city, to eventually make a connection into whatever would go into Lewis Farms. Lewis Farms has been zoned mixed PUD since the early 2000s. It was either 2002 or 2003. So these are not surprises. This zoning and planning has been in place for the better part of 20 years. It just took a while for ownership to change, and then people come in, and then we say, okay, it's time to develop what are the fundamentals here. Zoning, planning, street network, drainage, etc. So those details have all been applied to phases 1 and 2. It takes a while for a subdivision to build in. And eventually, phases 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever comes in will all be required to have full sidewalk networks. Sidewalk goes in as homes are built. So plats take about 5 to 10 years to mature. In this market, those phases are going quickly. So it wasn't that long ago that we were looking at phase 1. Looking at phase 3 now, when I look at that whole block that's called Lewis Farms, that's a pretty major piece of property for Walker. And if you look around the site and you go into Talmadge, you see additional subdivisions going in all the way out here. And those are going in Talmadge because that's within their water and sewer district. They get the same water and sewer services that we do from the city of Grand Rapids. From a regional perspective, this whole area is served with water and sewer. Okay. So the green spaces that we do have, everyone likes. I certainly do as a staff member as well. But we know some things are going to grow in, so how do we keep it sustainable for the next 50, 60 years? And if you look at the homes on the east side of Kinney, between Remembrance, between this triangle here, they don't front on M11, but all the roads are connected. And what that does is it allows cars to move around and between neighborhoods without having to overload our major intersections. Now I agree about the connection to Wilson Avenue. And so I'm going to make everybody a little angry as we go through this, because I don't agree with the connection that is currently designed to Wilson Avenue. And that is why I'm going to end with the committee discussion. The blue line here is the property that's owned by Dave Visser. Steve Visser owns the property to the west, coming onto Wilson Avenue. And within the blue area on there, Dave is proposing phases 3 and 4 of his subdivision and then some condominiums. This is a picture that Dan put together before he left, and I think it's pretty good. It shows the entire development. It also shows phases 1 and 2, where they've gone in. It shows Shannon to the north. And then it shows the outline for phase number 3, which is you folks are proposing, or tasked with looking at tonight. And then phase number 4 and how the rest of the development would kick in. The rest of the development, as I understand it, is really conceptual at this point, so that means to me it's a blank sheet of paper. So let's do it right. All right, and I fully understand concerns about road connectivity, but I also understand that we don't do some connections, then we overload our major intersections and traffic gets worse. So how do you make connections in a way that do not create easy throughs? The folks on Cummings, where the signal just went in, they've got a fairly legitimate beef, right? Because you're coming off of M45, Cummings is straight in both directions. You really can't go anywhere going north, but going south you certainly can. And people are going to eventually find that to O'Brien. But that's part of city street design as well. That doesn't mean we make the road 5 lanes. You make the road 5 lanes, the speeds go way up. And prior to many of you coming on the board, we did pass a complete streets resolution here. And I'm going to come back to that, particularly for a project like this, for how do we design these streets so that the traffic can move, but they're not highways. So I'm going to challenge the Planning Commission as this moves forward to really take some of those complete street standards and plug them in here, more than just a couple of bump outs, to make these streets compatible to the extent possible. How do you control people from speeding? I live in a subdivision and people rip up and down my street all the time. I don't know how to stop that, other than putting speed bumps in the road. And this climate, that's just not going to work. So, what can we do here to make this thing work? Let me jump out to this, and we can look at the plan. Remember, for tonight, we're looking at phase 3 of the Plat, but I completely understand the comments about don't do anything until you get all the infrastructure complete. So let me quick zoom out. Bear with me for a second. And I'm kind of coming into this late in the game because Dan, our planner, left. But I agree that there are some fundamental problems with this plan. Not necessarily with phase 3. Okay, this is kind of an awkward way because we've got to zoom out. But this is the plan itself for Lewis Farms. Leonard Street is to the south. Wilson Avenue is along this stretch. So phase 3 for the subdivision is outlined right here. Okay. So this is what you're being tasked with reviewing per resolution tonight. Would be final preliminary plat for phase 3. The subdivision is the same as phase 1 and phase 2. It is ready for approval for final preliminary plat. From a staff perspective, from an ordinance perspective. If you approve final preliminary plat tonight, then the developer will have the right to work with engineering to put together construction plans and start building the road and grading the site. Same thing they did with phase 1 and 2. Here.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. So what we're looking at here is the road going north that first connection is Shannon right there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The whole orange boundary is
right.
phase 3.
That's why I just wanted to make sure I'm looking at it right. So this is going north and that's Shannon. Not that you can see my pen, but
yes, I'm
I can.
Trying to.
And then what's that next little cul-de-sac? That's going to be a new street?
He has that, Dave has this laid out as Sharps Court.
Okay. And what's that to the north then?
That would be a cul-de-sac, potentially temporary, potentially short-term. I don't think this gentleman to the north has any interest in developing his property.
And what street is this up at the north?
This is Sharps Drive.
No, the boundary. There's nothing up
This
there.
is
It's just a
vacant
line.
property.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Vacant property.
That's why I was a little bit confused. I'm like, is that a street? Okay.
So as these projects
got
go
it.
in, we try and lay them out just like we did with Shannon, just like we did with Winchester, just like we do all over the city, so that connections can be made, so that way traffic can disperse and we're not overloading our main intersections at the peak hours. So trash pickup is easier, so police and fire can get at it, so DPW can get at it. But the missing element here, there's a couple of missing elements. This connection to Wilson Avenue, there are alternatives for this. Okay, because essentially this is a white sheet of paper. So how do we make this work? Listening to these folks, looking at city standards, how do we make it work? I think Dave's okay for phase 3, okay? Because what Dave's gonna do for phase 3 is the same thing he's done in phase 1 and 2. The public street will come out, this public street will connect to Shannon, this will come up here. That's a functional unit. He needs second access in order to get any more building permits. It's just part of our city standard. You wanna go over 25 lots, you need a second way in and out, because now we wanna make sure that you can get police and fire and trash and move people around safely. So I think he's okay with this. What I'm recommending to Planning Commission, because there is a gas station that's being proposed down here on February 5th. So now these folks are feeling what the folks in Standale have been feeling, which is the peak of the market and a lot of people interested in developing property. So I think we did a good job in Standale of saying, hey, we need to do a comprehensive access management plan. And my recommendation to Planning Commission on the 5th of February is going to do the same thing. For this gas station, and we've already told the gas station people this, do the public hearing, take comments, table, because we need to get a committee together to study all of this access with MDOT before anything further goes, anything more than phase 3 up here, and before that gas station goes in. Okay, and that will allow us to put these plans side by side. And the last thing I'll say is, I'm trying to listen to you. I'm trying to hear. And I think there's a way, because we have a blank slate here, where if this project connects to Leonard and does not connect to Wilson, this development, which is going to be condominiums and potentially commercial, who knows what that's going to be. I hope it's medical, to mimic the other corner, kitty corner. Then this connects to Leonard, Wilson, and up here. That's spreading the load, and I think that may be a reasonable point between the two developments, where you still get connectivity in a nice way out for the folks up in the subdivision. And then these folks, which will be a different clientele, most likely seniors, will have their own connectivity out here, but you're not cul-de-sacking things off. Now, the last thing I'll say is this drive, we need to look really carefully at this. And the same thing with this gas station to the south, because they currently have a full service drive here. We need to look really carefully at that. If you've been around a while, and I've been doing planning on the northwest side for 20 years now, we learned on Alpine Avenue that you do not put in full service driveways with all turns without a signal.
Right.
And if you recall what we did over the years, and now Alpine's a bigger street, the volumes are higher. I would argue that the speeds are probably higher on Wilson than they are on Alpine, because there's not the congestion.
Right.
And if you recall the old Circuit City driveway, I'm dating myself, and then the drive at Kingsbury and M37 Alpine Avenue, those were some of the highest crash generators in the county. This was in the early 2000s we were talking about this, and then into the recession. And we had to go in and force those to no longer have left turn movements. So why repeat it? And when I look at these, I think this is why the Planning Commission needs to sit down with MDOT at the committee level and all of our staff and take a very careful look at these. Because Wilson, the volumes are nowhere near Alpine Avenue, but the speeds are, the stacking is getting long, everybody's working. The peak hours are getting more congested, and it'll be that way until the next big recession, so which may be a long time. And regardless of economics, best design principles need to prevail here. So Now, I'm gonna get off my soapbox, but as long as I'm sitting in the planning director position, I think that's the way we should go about this. So my point to planning commission would be, on the 5th, table the gas station, put this thing together, work with the developers, probably break off this one, and then we'll work on the design of these.
Questions?
Yes, throw them out there, please.
Okay, I like what you're proposing here for the most part. The condos, that main street, I believe it's Willow Grove Lane, private. So that north end of that will never be extended?
I would never say never. We're putting cul-de-sacs in, and you know what? 10, 20 years from now, never's a long time. If that property changes hands to the north and someone wants to develop it, it's master plan for a residential up to 2 units per acre, similar to what phase 1, 2, 3, and 4 are, and we would look to make that connection.
When I look at all of our city streets, our plan is connectivity. And so we're gonna have connectivity going up. I can't read it, but this phase 3, we'll have connectivity there and to the north. And so once you start putting condos in that's private, I look at that, you will have an entrance and an exit. You'll have 2 ways in, but you know, whatever the future's going to be. So, you know, and I looked at Kinney, Remembrance, Wilson, down to Leonard. You go on maps and look, you got one street that cuts across, you can get across there. 3 Mile Road on the north end. Major traffic. It's the only connecting road we got. And so I know folks are not happy, but we got to have connectivity to get traffic to move, and we can't have a fire someplace and have an accident and the fire department can't get down that street and they have to go, they need an alternate route to get there or whatever. So there's reasons. We don't do this to make people unhappy, but there's reasons why we do and what the city does. So, but I think, Frank, I like what you're proposing there, but at what point do we say no until we get it done? If we agree to this, are we done there until this phase for everything from Leonard up Wilson to the north end?
My advice would be for this particular project, I don't want to do a broad brush, but for Lewis Farms and for the gas station, and this is what we're going to say to the Planning Commission on the 5th, put a hold on everything outside of phase 3 until we get together and put this access management plan together. Okay, so that way we're trying to listen, we're trying to say, okay, hey, let's dash this thing in, no connection to Wilson. I can buy that. And the grading may be better that way. But nobody cares about grading. We're starting with a blank sheet of paper, right? So that's going to be my recommendation is if we go through with 3 tonight, which I think we can, it'll be a good thing in the long run because now you've got redundancy. It's going to be a change because all the greenery over here is going to be impacted. But we're following through with the plan and the zone and the zoning. The rest of this needs to be studied along with the gas station, along with these driveways by design, and then we really need to look at a left phase, the left turning phase at this intersection. This is becoming a major intersection. So the traffic studies can be dictated by the types of driveways that go in here. That all needs to be shaken out before we get too deep into anything else here. And I think that's a fairly reasonable compromise. And from a planning standpoint, we need to do this right. You know, this development, once it's done, is going to be there for the next 50, 60, 75 years. So let's get the bones of it right. And hopefully we can reach an agreement that no, if there is no connectivity to Leonard, then that'll be okay, or excuse me, to Wilson, then that addresses your concerns, but we'll still get you to Leonard, because trust me, that will be something valuable for the people who live there. So hopefully, I apologize for being too gruff up front. It's part of my type A personality. I haven't learned to get that out of my extreme type A, so I apologize for that. But I'm hopeful that something like this, as long as the planning commission and city commission go along with what we're saying, but it's planning staff's job to try and keep the peace to the extent possible while still doing good planning. So that's where I'm at. I'm done talking.
I got one more question.
There we go, I'm not done talking.
You're not done talking. You know, the work we did on Leonard Street with all the muck and everything, and, when I get near Stand Alley, I'm sure they've done the studies, but we're gonna be able to handle all the rooftops and all the blacktop and stormwater.
Well, the city worked with the developer of phases 1 and 2 to acquire this property that is city-owned now, and that is a regional detention basin. So, the short answer is yes. This was acquired based on a projection for everything that's going to drain into it. The folks on Shannon, if you recall, I don't know if there's anybody here from Shannon Street. Yep. Your backyards on the south side of Shannon were graded the wrong way, and the low spot goes right through the middle of your backyard, as I'm sure some of you know. So when phases 1 and 2 of Winchester Woods came in, if you recall, there was also some pretty major flooding next to the Knott's house, if you know the Knott's on Kinney. They were not happy with phases 1 and 2 going in because of the drainage impacts on them. And we worked with the developer to change that drainage and fix, at least I hope, some of the pre-existing problems on Shannon, and pull that water into the street storm sewer system and get it down to this detention basin. So it's not only going forward, it's also looking back and trying to fix some of the problems of the past.
Thank you.
Can I follow up on that? So I was at the Planning Commission meeting in December, and I know Scott talked about the drainage plans and that things were going to be direct. Is that that's the area that is going to be drainage for all of this?
Eventually, all of the stormwater for this whole part of town will end up in this detention basin.
Okay.
There have been problems, I think Deanne was alluding to this, there have been drainage problems up here probably for 100 years. The soil itself, you're talking to a soils person, soil capability in this area is not real good. Pre-existing, it was probably all some kind of bog swamp. So now you start building on top of that, well, that doesn't go away, the hydrology is still there. So when the road was reconstructed, that was one of the major challenges of dealing with that peat soil, which was deep. So they extracted, and they've got these big foam boxes under it. There's a giant water line, there's a 46-inch water line that goes through here. Way too much detail for this, right? The problem, or the drainage for this area goes into this detention basin, and this will as well. It's trying to get ahead of the game a little bit. And then as this site incrementally builds out, make sure that the drainage is being done well. Better than it was. But the land itself, if you're a soil scientist or a land scientist, the land itself is challenging. It's not like it's all sand with a low groundwater table. You know, a lot of these soils are marginal. They're corrected as these footprints go in for these buildings, including phases 1 and 2. Hopefully you can get down to native soil, but yeah, the soils up here are not the best. It doesn't mean they're unbuildable by any means. It just means that they're going to be a challenge. It's not going to, you know, if it rains, it's going to be wet underground. What we don't want is flooding. So that's why for these plats, and you see it on your plan, there are things called minimum basement openings, MBO table on there. So they're required to build a foot above the localized floodplain so that you, as long as no one messes with the grading, the buildings are outside of the flood, the localized flood.
Thanks. Yeah.
Others? Okay. Well, I've been along for this ride for quite some time on the neighborhood here, Winchester Woods, and I know that Phase 3 here that we're looking at today, I think, is very good, approvable plan, and I think that what Frank said is right, that we absolutely need a more deliberative and thoughtful long-term discussion on what the rest of the Lewis Farms project looks like. Obviously, the neighborhood has come out and spoken to us, and we certainly hear you there that there are concerns about the way that this was initially laid out, and I would reiterate Frank's point that at this point we are working with a blank slate. I think we do have some visions for, I think a connection to Leonard would be very desirable for us in the way that we're creating access to the sites. But I think that, again, we do need to have a very serious discussion about how we're laying out all of the access to all of this site. I will take a minute to plug the drainage work that was done here. There was a ton of effort put in initially when we put this together. The drainage there that you see in the green highlighted on the screen was designed, I think, to retain all of the site. I think there is a small piece in the upper right corner that does have to be put somewhere else, right, Frank?
Yes, this is, for those of you who live on Shannon, or I forget the street to the north, I apologize. Mission. Detention in this area has to go this way. And this is another one of the lessons that we've learned, and the design engineer is going to work with city engineering through the stormwater permitting process so that there's no even release from a basin that goes towards Shannon.
Yep.
We do.
Yep.
We do, and that's pre-existing.
Since he just moved the trees there, now we've got a ton of water coming in where it's.
Yeah. And my point to bring that up is that we are doing our due diligence, trying to make sure we're doing the work to capture as much of that water as we can and make sure that we're making sure this site doesn't have any impact on those folks in those neighborhoods that are existing. So a lot of effort has gone into all of this, but for the part that we're considering today, I think Winchester Woods Phase 3 is a good project, looks, from my perspective, ready to be approved. And I think that there is certainly a much longer discussion warranted for the Lewis Farms portion of this project. And I think that we are committed to having that. As the member of the City Commission on the Planning Commission, I can tell you that I will be supporting that discussion, and I believe the Planning Commission will as well. So with all of that added, I suppose, does anyone have any further comment?
I just want to go back to, I like what Frank said, and I think that concept looks much better than the original. But what is the protocol when residents email the city?
Oh, yes.
I mean, that is
well.
somewhat concerning that they didn't hear back, and then, lost my train of thought. But I just, and what initiates a public hearing if there's a bunch of people that want to get their point across? Those are just some questions I have, and I'd like to make sure that they have an answer.
Yep. So on the email portion of it, you did see a good portion of the emails included in the packet. I believe there were some emails you did not see included in the packet. When we come to the meetings, they give us what they've got when they put the packet together. Anything that comes in after that point is left in front of us for our review at that point. Yes. I'm not 100% sure. It depends on when they're putting the packet together. So that's city staff, our staff planner at the time, Dan Power, would have put that together. But we do end up with typically a number of emails that are in hard copy on our desk prior to the beginning of the meeting. And that's where we would review those. Just for the point of awareness, we do get exposed to the information, but I will certainly make note, and I think we need to do a better job of record keeping the information as it comes in. Yes.
Well, then my next comment would be, there needs to be something perhaps on the city's website that if residents are sending in emails, that you indicate a date by which those should be sent so that they are included in the minutes of.
Right, so that we can have a send by for the packets. And as far as the noticing on the reviews, I know that we have a threshold statutorily for noticing, and I think we go a bit beyond that for how we send the notices.
The postcards?
Yep.
Okay, that was
Yep, so
my
if
other
your,
question.
if your parcel is within X distance of the lot line for the project, that's what our threshold is. So that's a physical measurement that we use, correct?
That's correct. The rezoning, in this case, or planning and development, those are all regulated by state law. We use a computer system to generate the mailing labels, and then the mailing labels are put onto a card. Now, one of the things that I've recently done here, and you may have seen on our social media post, is the cards will now, anything that comes from community development that's put in the mail will now be bright green. So when you see something green show up in your mailbox and it's a 5x7 card, that is from the city. We were using white stock before, and I think a lot of people just like I do, you go through your junk mail and it's very easy to throw those out. So going forward, number one, I apologize for the need to improve our processing of emails. We will get better at that, and they will be read into the record. Number two, from a notification standpoint, look for those green cards. That we're going to keep putting that out on social media. If you get a green card in the mail that's from the city, please take a look at it because it has to do with something that's important to you.
Is there a link on those green cards so that the resident can go right to a link and see what, like, if there's more in-depth information as regard what it's about?
Those would probably be the planning, what it'll notice is the meeting, and we have the public information for the meeting. Everything that we're exposed to, you guys will have access to, with the exception of the emails that did not make it into the record that we get on our desks prior to the meeting.
But all of our project plans, everything goes out onto the city website. So if you're looking for something, it is available in electronic format on the city website. So the card just says, please be notified that there's a public hearing on this date at 7 p.m. or soon hereafter. And then there is a paragraph that says, you can offer written comments by up to the time of the meeting itself. But we will go back and double check that. That language comes right out of the state law.
Commissioner Glanville?
Yeah, I was just wondering too, is there do residents get a response when they send an email? Or is it, I'm wondering, like I know I respond when I get emails, but I don't know if they go to the planning commission. Who does that go to?
That would be the staff planner, and I believe Dan was pretty good historically about making sure
that the email was received.
I believe.
Okay, because that's what I was wondering, if we need to set up some kind of autoresponders and things so people know that their email didn't just go into.
Right, some type of box or something.
We're pretty good at it. The volume is high, but it's small enough where we can give personal response. And Dan was very good at that, and the new person who comes on board, we're going to expect that as well.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm seeing shaking heads in the audience, so I'm assuming some folks did not get.
Yeah. Received them. Yeah.
Had you exchanged any emails prior, just making sure that you had the correct address for him? I know he changed. Probably. Should have been.
Yeah, and I apologize for that. Well, yeah, feel free to give me a copy of that, and then I'm going to make sure. But hopefully we've heard, what we've talked about tonight directly addresses your concern.
Yeah, it does. I'm just saying.
Yep. Yep.
You can see that I sent it to Dan at the correct email address, and I received that.
Yeah. No, and we appreciate you bringing that to us because we do want to be good about making sure that we're having open communication with our residents. And so thank you for that, and we'll continue to work to improve on that. Yeah.
I believe it was, you had 5 years to put it in, or when the house was built previous to that.
Technically,
When was phase 1 and 2 established?
I don't even think it was 5 years.
I've been on the planning commission for 5 years as of this
Yeah.
month, and I know I was on the board when we first initially had reviewed that. So I would think there's probably a little bit of time left on that. Not sure exactly to the date, but we can.
A few lots in phase 1 that probably won't sell anytime soon. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know what your master plan, I think I saw something about a new trail going along Kinney at some point, I think not.
Carol's the expert on trails.
Yeah. The part that I'm familiar with at this point is north of Remembrance here,
Okay.
where they're
Right.
putting in
Yep.
more trail and sidewalk on Kinney. I don't know that we've talked about south of Remembrance,
Yep.
but I could go back and verify that.
But that's already served on Remembrance. So there's quite a system. But Carol's your point of contact for trails.
Yep, Commissioner Glanville's very good about that. Okay, so anyways, back to Winchester Woods Phase 3. If we have any other commission comments on that, otherwise we'll look for a motion.
Definitely. I'll give you my copy of that. Can't do, well, we'll make sure that you get a copy. If you give me your name afterwards, I'll make sure you get a copy.
Yeah.
Or you can talk directly to each gentleman and get a copy.
And how soon after approval do they start doing things like for phase 3?
They still have to go through construction plan review, but I assume that they'll want to start breaking ground once the weather breaks.
All right, so do we have a motion on Winchester Woods Phase 3?
I'll make a motion.
Motion from Commissioner Heisinger. Support?
I'll support.
Support from Commissioner Gruters. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, folks. So with that, if we have any other public comment, we'll take it at this time. Seeing none, we will move on to Commissioner and City Manager comments. So if we want to start over at the left here with our City Manager.
Sure, I just have a couple of comments for you. Just to note that at the January 28th meeting, we'll be doing our Commission and Boards Awards presentation and acknowledgements that we do every year in January. So those that have reached 5-year milestones, so we'll be doing that on the 28th. And then I know Shannon had sent you out a Survey Monkey for Dave Pelton's 6-month review. So if you can make sure you get that on your calendar and respond by the 17th, I think was the deadline, so we can do his 6-month performance review probably within the month sometime. We'll have to schedule a personnel meeting to accomplish that. So I think the format worked pretty good last time when we did it for the police chief using the Survey Monkey, and then we'll compile those results and meet with Dave and provide some feedback to him. So
Perfect.
that's all I have. Thank you.
Commissioner Kent?
I'm all set, thank you.
Great. Commissioner Shane?
No comments, but thanks for all the detail on Winchester Woods. I thought that was good, and I'm glad that we have another opportunity to for connectivity and traffic management.
Absolutely. All right. Commissioner Heisinger?
None for me.
Great. Commissioner Gruters?
Former Commissioner Howland is not here to promote CapCon. So I know there's some upcoming educational opportunities, and I have actually signed up for the March 25, I think it was, the CapCon conference. But I found that to be really worthwhile and plan to go.
Commissioner Glanville?
I think I made most of my comments earlier, but I would, they've all left now, but I wanted to thank all the people who came to the meeting tonight. Like, I'm really encouraged when we have strong citizen input. You know, it helps us all do our jobs better. And for those of you out there listening, please come. You know, it'd be great to see you here, because it really does make our job a lot easier to know, you know, what their thoughts and feelings are and to be able to work those things in. So I appreciate that. Yeah, so with that, thanks.
Perfect. And our city clerk?
Nothing from the clerk side, other than Commissioner Heisinger, if you can get with me and maybe contact Jessica, so I could schedule the next CEC meeting. Thanks.
Yes.
Just another reminder, since Melanie brought up the MML, tomorrow night we will be hosting the MML training here in the commission conference room, and I think we have like 55 people signed up from Petoskey, Newaygo, all over the west side of the state, and I think even somebody from the east side of the state's coming over. So it should be a good showing. So.
Fantastic. All right. Well. Sounds good. No.
You got anything, Steve?
No, I'm all set. Motion from Commissioner Kent.
Support.
Support from Commissioner Heisinger. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned.